A big thank you to Bitdefender Total Security 2020 for sponsoring this video. I love my iPad Pro. I use it every single day. And lately, a lot of people are loving their iPads more than ever before.
I have been using my iPad so much more.
I choose the iPad.
The iPad has really been one of my favorite Apple devices.
I've been using the iPad in this setup a ton.
For a lot of things, the iPad Pro plus Magic Keyboard is the perfect combination. And for those of you that have used some version of both, chances are you can get to the same end result, the end of a task, as you would on a laptop. But how you get there is generally different on an iPad versus a laptop. And I think the question that I want to pose to you for the cost of an iPad is making that change worth it. Should the iPad change to suit you, or should you change what you're used to suit the iPad? All right, so let's talk about the Magic Keyboard. I'm 2 weeks into using it, so kind of a mini review of what this thing can do. And first, let's get it out of the way. It is expensive, and for a lot of folks, it's prohibitively expensive. Either $300 or $350, depending on the size iPad you have. That is, any way you cut it, a lot of money. I'm not here to tell you if it's worth it or not, but if you decide to spend that amount of money, here's what you're going to get. First, you're going to get a hinge that feels more durable than almost any laptop hinge that I've used. Obviously, this is a touch-sensitive thing, so you don't want to have any hinge wobble. This thing is built like a tank, and it's heavy. And it's heavy for a reason, so that it's weighted normally. You have an iPad on top and the keyboard down below. It's not going to tip over when you try to touch that screen. So the weight, when you combine the iPad Pro plus the keyboard, is essentially the same as a MacBook Air. The keyboard that's in here feels like a legit keyboard you'd find on any laptop. It is an incredibly enjoyable typing experience. But the big things you get here is, first, you've got a trackpad built in. It's a smaller trackpad than it might be used to on a laptop, but it is completely usable. And it's also a real clicky trackpad, and it works amazingly and perfectly. And it was kind of strange what Apple did with the cursor, how it's kind of round and then it adapts as you move over certain icons. I got used to it very quickly. There's no setup needed. Once you put this thing on the Magic Keyboard, the cursor just shows up. And that plays to the strengths of the Magic Keyboard. It's plug and play. You just pop it on there. It appears to be floating. It's aesthetically beautiful. And things just start working right away. As soon as you pull the iPad off, all the cursory stuff tend to go away. So not everything is perfect though. I wish the hinge could fold around and I could fold the keyboard back and just use this as my only case for an iPad. There are a couple things that seem like big omissions to me. First, an escape key. And I know you can remap keys to simulate an escape key, but having an actual key I think could be really helpful. And a lot of people are complaining about lack of function keys, and I think I'm one of them. And I can understand why Apple didn't include them because of lack of space. But I think there was a missed opportunity to maybe even include sort of a virtual touch bar at the bottom of the iPad, where you could have those function keys on the iPad if there wasn't room. So while I am really enjoying using the Magic Keyboard, I am noticing an insane battery drain. Even with the backlight turned almost all the way down, I'm losing about 20 to 25% per hour. I'm not sure if that's a software or hardware thing. I have ordered a replacement keyboard to see if perhaps it's hardware based. I really like having it though, and I find myself using it more than I thought I would. But certainly nobody needs to have this, just like nobody needs to have an iPad. But if you want a companion to your iPad and want to make your iPad more versatile, I think this is probably the best and most elegant way to go. So as everybody is working from home, I mean, where I am sitting right now is feet from my kids' rooms. Security is paramount, not just for my home, but also for my online business life, since that provides for my family. And that's where something like Bitdefender Total Security 2020 comes into play. It works on whatever device you are on, but it's a total security package. You don't just need like one app for one thing and another company for another. This protects everything about your digital life. So you've got things like network threat protection, so it'll stop attacks before they even begin, ransomware remediation. As somebody who has had ransomware attacks, especially when I ran Techno Buffalo, that is something that is really important. Parental controls, which is super important right now as everybody's kids are at home. And I think what's the coolest thing, you've got Bitdefender Central. It's one app that you can manage all of this in and see how it all works together. So in addition to protection, you're also getting a host of privacy features as well to sort of keep yourself, your identity, sort of free and away from any prying eyes with maybe nefarious intentions. If you want to give Bitdefender Total Security 2020 a shot, usually it's only a 30-day trial, but they're actually giving away 4 free months right now for US and Canada. That hopefully will give you enough time to keep yourself secure, get through this pandemic, and kind of show you how valuable their services can be. The more I use the iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard, kind of the more I'm remembered that Microsoft has been at this game for a while. And this isn't going to be a versus of the Surface line versus the iPad Pro, but it is a reminder that in kind of typical Apple fashion, they sat back and waited for other companies to sort of learn and do things, and then came to market with their own. But the Surface line's been around for a while. And I think it shows that there's still room for improvement with the Magic Keyboard. One of the great things about the Surface line is you can get it pretty close to flat if you want to draw with a pencil. You can't do that right now with the Magic Keyboard. It took Microsoft years to perfect that hinge. Presumably Apple is going to be in the same boat. Perhaps version 2 or 3 will give us sort of that ultimate versatility that we're expecting. So that's kind of all I'm going to say about the Microsoft and Apple comparison, just to say that there's other companies that have been doing things similar for a while. And that's not to say the iPad Pro isn't good. Like I've been saying, I use it and I enjoy it. But perhaps the biggest problem with the iPad Pro is that the cheapest entry-level iPad is still so good. And for the most part, can do almost everything the iPad Pro can, save for a few things. You're not getting the new design, you don't have the LiDAR cameras, you're not getting access to the newest Apple Pencil. But everything else, the iPad can do and does it really well and very fast. So I think the big question here is, are you better off just going with an iPad and not the iPad Pro? So just to bring cost back into discussion, you can get the entry-level iPad with max storage, 128 gigs. You can buy an Apple Pencil and their smart keyboard for about $745 before taxes. That is less expensive than the cheapest iPad Pro available without any accessories. So unless you need to have the latest design, you have to have that LiDAR sensor on the back and you want that extra power, what you're getting from the entry-level iPad with those first-party Apple accessories is essentially what Apple was offering with the iPad Pro before the Magic Keyboard came out. You are getting like 90% of the way there to the iPad Pro for significantly less money. So I think if I sort of put myself in the shoes of somebody that didn't have any iPad and was looking to get into that iPad world, which one would I go with? And if I decided to go with the entry-level iPad, I think I would be very happy. Now, some things I think I would miss. I think I would miss having Face ID, for example. But almost everything else the entry-level iPad gives me. Yeah, the design's a little bit outdated. It looks like an older generation model. But functionally, it's still almost the same. But if you're on the other side and you say, okay, I want to spend that money for an iPad Pro, once you've committed to spending that level of cash, there's another question that you have to answer, another competitor to the iPad. You're better off just getting a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air? So the cheapest way to get an iPad Pro plus a Magic Keyboard is the smaller 11-inch iPad with 128 gigs of storage, which is the entry model. That's gonna set you back before taxes $1,100. And what's kind of interesting here is the base MacBook Air is $999. The base MacBook Pro is $1299. You're not that far off, and in some cases even cheaper than what Apple themselves are offering for their laptops. Not to mention the tons and tons of PC options that are available for the laptop world. So I come back to the question at the beginning. So $1,100 you're gonna spend for the iPad Pro plus a Magic Keyboard. It'll do, chances are, most of what you want it to do. But you're gonna have to change the way you do it. Whereas the cheaper MacBook Air is going to do all of your computer things the way a computer is expected to do it. There are other apps that might not work, or other apps you have to download on the iPad. It's going to be a very different experience to get to that same result. And again, to remake that point, a computer is just going to do those things the way you are used to. You don't have to relearn how to use a computer because the MacBook Air or whatever the PC counterpart you decide to get is going to work the way you expect it to. There's a possibility that the iPad may never be a full PC replacement for me and maybe for you because of how I view a computer. And perhaps if you're sort of coming up and you never had a laptop or you're willing to make those changes and sacrifices, it's a matter of perspective. You know, from my perspective, a laptop is still a laptop and an iPad is still an iPad. But maybe I could be in the minority here. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on the iPad plus keyboard and trackpad support. Is that enough for you as a full-fledged computer, or is there something that you're missing that you absolutely have to have on a laptop? And perhaps Apple has some iPad OS surprises for us when the new version hits at WWDC, or at least gets shown at WWDC. But until we get to that point, I think there are two very clear camps. An iPad is a really good iPad that can do a lot of laptop things, and a laptop is still a laptop that I think is best for most people for work.